how today we are joined by Peter Thomas, all the way from the UK. So Peter, how's it going?
Thanks so much for having me on the show. It's early morning here. I'm glad we could get the times to line up. I'm still drinking my coffee.
Yeah. Oh, actually, I hate to admit it, but I'm still drinking my coffee as well, and it's in the evening time, which is like when I listen to all the health gurus. It's the terrible worst thing you possibly do, but
Mate, you got
it's
to
more.
focus on your sleep. It's really
Yeah,
important. I
yeah.
listened to a podcast on it the other day. It was really inspiring.
Yeah. See, I sometimes when I listen to podcasts telling me about the sleep patterns and stuff, I find it really sobering and a little bit depressing. But that might just be because I need to do something about my lifestyle. So, Peter, just to introduce the audience to you, I mean, I've been following you now on LinkedIn probably for the best part of 6 months, maybe a little bit longer now. You came onto my radar, and ever since you've been a familiar face and a familiar figure on my LinkedIn feed, doing some really phenomenal work. So perhaps I'll give you the opportunity to introduce yourself to the team.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Pete Thomas, chartered safety professional based in the UK. I'm really interested in technology and how tech can help us to improve safety. And I could see this coming a couple of years ago. We've seen this digital transformation in a number of industries. We're not the first one now, in terms of safety. It's like AI has been in finance for, I don't know, well over a decade, maybe nearly 2 decades. And we've seen the positive impact that it's had. And then I could see this wave of digital transformation coming for health and safety. And I thought, this is it. This is our time. This is what we've been waiting for in safety to actually make a difference. Because I don't know what it's like in New Zealand, but in the UK, like these serious accidents and fatality statistics have just flatlined. And they've been flatlined for like, I don't know, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, since before I started in safety. And if they have trickled down in that time, it's very, very small marginal gains, very small marginal improvements. And so there's this idea that, how can we make the best use of tech to help improve this? And, as a safety guy, I just didn't want to miss out. I didn't want to be watching from the sidelines. I wanted to be involved in this process. And so I just threw myself into it, really.
Yeah, it's fantastic, and it's interesting to hear about the stats and the flatlining in the UK as well. So for us, um, I think back to the London Olympics, and around about that period, we were still responding and getting our heads around the Pike River disaster, and we had just at that stage started looking at the introduction of a new legislation, and so we had people from the London Olympics, and they were brought over to New Zealand to speak to us and to give us some idea about what great looked like. And so it's interesting now, thinking back to those days, where for the last decade in the UK, the stats have pretty much stagnated. It's very much the same here in New Zealand. The stats have pretty much stayed the same since all of that change. A new legislation, regulator, new focus on health and safety, but nothing is actually changed in terms of those numbers. So
That's
I agree.
interesting that you say London Olympics, by the way. So that was when I got into health and safety.
Mm-hmm.
So I was in the police in the UK, and I was actually a police sniper at the London Olympics in 2012. And then
Okay.
I left that profession, and then I went to work in the Middle East, and then sort of fell into health and safety.
Mm-hmm.
And it was interesting because people go, well, what does that have to do with this? And it's like, well, it's this. It's a very interesting role in terms of risk management, should I say. It's not half your time isn't shooting, let's be honest. It's risk management, it's contingency planning, it's operational planning. It's taking a measured response to risk, and so that's how I sort of got into health and safety. I know everyone's got an interesting story as to how they sort of fell into health and safety. No one goes, well, I was at careers day in school and they told me about NEBOSH qualifications or something. I don't know what your quals are like down there, but yeah, no one ever does that.
No. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I like that description of falling into safety. 99% of the people that I've spoken to are all on that same page. I think I was boasting about it in a training session not so long ago, and one person put their hand up and said, "Oh, actually, you've now just met 2 people that have gone out of their way to be in health and safety," which was mind blowing. But Yeah, that's a really interesting transition. But as you've described that, it makes sense, right? It's you've got really dynamic risk environment, and I would like to think probably 98, 99% of your time wasn't actually um, lining the sights and ready to shoot. It was probably more around
Operational planning, contingency planning is very sort of a multidisciplinary approach of just one small part and a very, small cog in a very, very big machine. And yeah, it's it's interesting.
mm, yeah, it's nice, it's fascinating. And then also on the same page as you in terms of it does kind of feel like we're about to, or we have this opportunity to ride this really exciting wave of change where I feel, and you may agree here, that the health and safety practitioner, whether in-house or external, has been tied down by reports and the generation of those reports. And if they're lucky, they might get to actually table them in front of the decision makers. But generally, they're kind of handcuffed to the desk,
Yep.
and hoping that the data that they've got in front of them is even valid. Like in terms of accuracy, in terms of relevancy. It's just, yeah, you kind of get to a point where you're starting to wonder what is our role and purpose here, right? So yeah, I'm with you in terms of what this new world offers us.
And it's not just external innovation affecting safety that we apply to traditional businesses. Businesses have changed. Businesses have changed massively, not just in terms of the way we work, in terms of remote working, hybrid working, more geographical dispersed working. Businesses are a lot bigger now. They tend to be, the very big businesses tend to acquire businesses at quite a significant rate. So there's a huge issue there with standardization. Yeah, and then not only that, the industries that we see cropping up now are more and more innovative. We've got different challenges, EV vehicles. I was speaking to someone the other day that's working on hydrogen electric flight. It's like the world of work has changed. So what we need to do as safety professionals needs to adapt to that as well and needs to continually improve. Can I
Yeah,
steal that line?
yeah. Why not? Why not? So, you mentioned that you're kind of uh, you're passionate about the innovation and the tech that's hitting the market. You've taken steps to really play a key role in that in your space. So, you haven't had a chance to kind of mention Intuety or the My Safety consultant yet. We'll delve into those shortly.
Yep.
In terms of how they align to your vision around the modernization of safety practices through technology, like how would you unpack that?
Yeah, of course. Well, I'll just touch on my safety tech podcast.
Yeah,
So I had
please.
this, I really wanted to learn about tech. So the
Mhm.
first thing that I did is I got online and I found a course on coding in Python coding. I downloaded the systems and then
Yeah.
it was like typing like C DOS or something like in the old black screen, the DOS screen on Windows. Not a chance. It wasn't for me. I'm a safety guy. I'm not a tech guy. I'm not a coder. So I thought, well, do you know what? I'll do what I like. I like listening to podcasts. I'm going to set up a really, really niche podcast, which is my safety tech podcast. So thanks for giving me the opportunity to
Yeah.
plug that. It's on
Yeah.
Spotify. And no, I'm joking. You can
No,
find
no,
it.
no. It's definitely worth checking out. It's great. I really enjoy it.
But the whole idea is that there's all these tech leaders and innovators who are building these software systems to help improve safety. And I just really wanted to talk to them. I really wanted to learn from them. I really wanted to understand their motivation, like what inspired them to create this. And most of them, they're not safety. They've never come from a safety background. So they've got very like moral drivers. They've had something personally happen to them that's affected them. They've seen something happen to someone and they've gone, do you know what? I'm a tech guy. Like I understand this space. Let me see if I can bring my knowledge and skills to this profession, to this industry, to see if I can help improve safety. And that's something that I just found sort of very attractive. I was really attracted to. It's not about like, oh, we can build a scalable tech and make a quick buck. A lot of people are really driven by these moral drivers. Um, and then as part of that process through the podcast, I happened to be introduced to Intuety. And Intuety are an AI risk assessment company based in South Wales. So round the corner, not New South Wales, if you're down in that part of the
Yeah.
world,
Yeah.
but South Wales in the UK. So it's just around the corner from me in Somerset. And I'm originally from North Wales, so I immediately felt a connection. And in South Wales, there's a little town called Port Talbot, and there's a very famous steelworks there. So you can imagine the type of town that this is. You know, it's been very reliant. A lot of people have worked and grown up in the steelworks have been reliant on the steelworks, and the steelworks has been going through a series of closures and then rescued and then closures, and now it's finally succumbed, and it's, you know, that there is the steelworks will be closed, right?
Okay. Yep.
But the important thing is now is that we've got all of this innovation and technology being built up in that area, and there was something so cool about that. And then of all the people I've spoken to in the world, I've never seen an AI platform like this based in South Wales. So I just felt this immediate connection to it. But basically, what it does is the system was originally built by IBM. I want to say around about 5 years ago. And what it does is it looks very, very deep at risk. So it looks very specifically at risk assessment and that process of risk assessment. What do you call risk assessment? So is it like JSA or?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So it'd
Yep.
be JSA or a task analysis or a safe work methodology statement or a million other acronyms for it. Yep.
Yep. Fantastic. So it looks very, very deep at like a JSA or a risk assessment. And there are a lot of problems with this process that I can see, because a risk assessment is like the fundamental cornerstone, like it's the start line for everything in safety. Sorry, that was my dog there.
That's a big
So
dog.
it's the risk assessment is the cornerstone. It's the start of that health and safety process, right? To me, it determines everything. It even determines safety budget, because what we document in those control measures, that ultimately goes onto our spend. But there's an issue with this. Like, it's a phenomenally subjective process. I produce a risk assessment. It's going to be totally different to how you just produce a
Mm.
risk assessment. And if
Yep.
we start to put some quantitative numbers around it, like a 5 by 5 matrix, we know all day long they're going to be different.
Mm.
So how do we start to standardize that? And for me, that's a collaboration challenge. Like, if we can start to collaborate more, if we can start to share information more to go into these risk assessments, then we can start to improve standardization. If we can improve standardization, we can improve outputs, and we can actually start to measure the performance of a risk assessment. So in the UK, we have this term called suitable and sufficient. And it's like, your risk assessment is deemed suitable and sufficient. That's the gold stamp, right? But if something goes wrong and something ends up in court, someone's going to look at the risk assessment and go, well, it's not suitable and sufficient. Well, I don't want to find that out after the fact. I
Yeah.
want to know it is beforehand, and I want something that I can hang my hat on in terms of information. So there's a lot of challenges with risk assessment and with risk generally, and with what we do in safety. Another aspect which shouldn't be overlooked is this knowledge continuity piece. I talked about the world of work is changing. People are
Yeah.
moving on.
Yes.
You don't get people working in a business now for 30 years like they used to. In the UK, someone would go and work in safety. They'd have probably got into safety through the unionized route. They'd have been on a final salary pension. They'd have worked there for decades.
Yep.
That'd have been a lot of knowledge. Now in the UK, safety teams are turning over regularly. I was speaking to a company the other day. They lost hundreds of years of safety knowledge in one day due to a
Yeah.
merger, for example.
Yep.
Now, all of those people left. All of that knowledge has gone with them. And one of the issues that we've got in safety is, say we learn through continual improvement. If I just take one aspect, say I take lessons learned. Let's take lessons learned. It's how it's part of our plan, do, check, act process. It's part of our, this is how we continually improve our safety systems through lessons learned. But if I come into a company as a new safety manager, right, and there's like 10 lessons learned written down, can I learn them? Yeah, easily. Can I ingest them, understand them, and apply them at the time that I need to when I'm producing safety documentation? Yeah, easily. What if there's 100? What if there's 1,000? What if we're really good at this and there's 10,000 pieces of knowledge that we've learned as a company, and I want to just pick that up and be able to apply it at the point that I need to? I just can't. It's impossible. So I just feel like in safety, we keep losing this knowledge as people move, and then we keep starting the continual improvement cycle again. And I think at the moment with tech, there's this real concern that it's going to replace the safety professional. Now, I don't know what it's like with New Zealand legislation, but in the UK, You have to have a competent person. Everything is based, say, fire safety legislation is all about responsible persons. Health and safety is all about competent persons signing this off. Can't have tech sign it off. Has to be a person. So tech at the moment is just this amazing tool to share information. And then this peer review process, it's like someone looking over your shoulder with way more knowledge than you ever could have to go, have you thought about this? What about this? Someone over there did it this way, and what they found is this. It's just so powerful.
Pretty neat. And in terms of your point around the New Zealand legislation, not quite. So we don't have it going as far as that, rightly or wrongly, probably wrongly. But in terms of that loss of knowledge, I've seen it many, many times over the years. It's actually one of the key advantages of being a consultant, right? Is you have that kind of really high level oversight of what many businesses and organizations in various industries are struggling with and what their common pain points are. And one of the key ones is that key person dependency, where you've got
Yep.
one or two people who tend to be really exceptional that drive health and safety for a while, and then they go, and suddenly everything gets dropped, and you can see it. You can find all these really amazing documents and processes and folders that have been forgotten about in the depths of someone's computer, and then you can then see what they've been working on recently, and it's a complete reinvention of what had been done only a couple of years previously.
Yep.
It's just such a shame, because in terms of that continual improvement point, we're nowhere near where we really could be or ought to be in this new modern world. So
Yep.
you've definitely kind of hit one of the key pain points that I'm routinely seeing.
Yep.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So with the likes of the Intuety tool that you've just described, which just sounds amazing, and I have to admit I've had a bit of a behind the scenes preview, and it's mind blowing. How do you see or what do you perceive are some of the key upsides to using a platform like that, or having a system that's tapping into what the potential of AI presents?
So at the moment, we're looking at this knowledge continuity piece, and we're also looking at better supply chain management. So, for example, again, in the UK, what we'll have, say if we take an industry like construction, we'll have a client. They will have their own employees doing work normally. They will appoint contractors, and then those contractors will appoint subcontractors. And then each one of those will have their own lessons learned. So we'll have the legislation, we'll have all the guidance, we'll have all the industry knowledge that have come out from the industry bodies, and then they will interpret that in their own policies, procedures, SOPs, and the way that they've learned. But when a client takes on a contractor and goes, "We want you to do this work," how many times do they share that information between them? These are the lessons learned, and often the person producing the risk assessment isn't the person agreeing the contract. They'll have never seen any of this information. They just got told, we've got to produce a risk assessment for this. Fine. Risk assessment done, submitted. It's not taking into consideration any of those policies and procedures, those lessons learned. So this is one thing that Intuety does really well, is it will ingest all that data, protects it. We've got ISO 27001. It's all GDPR compliant. Sorry if I feel like I'm selling it here, because I'm trying to sell the broader benefits of tech, not necessarily Intuety, but
yeah.
All of that will be ingested and will be put in a secure area for that organization. So when a contractor comes along and they drag and drop, they can upload a risk assessment and a method statement, or JSA, Safe System of Work, whatever you call it, and it will analyze that. Again, it will pull it all apart, pull all the data out of it, and then it will analyze all of that risk assessment against all of the available data in the system. So it'll analyze it against all of those company policies and procedures, everything that organization, the client organization, wants to see. It will analyze it against all the health and safety executive guidance, all of their approved codes of practice, how to comply with the legislation. And then it will also look at any other publicly available information. So these, in the UK, we get quasi-public sector bodies like Network Rail. They're like a huge infrastructure organization that's kind of part government, part private sector, if that makes sense. They will release lessons learned all the time. And when you take enough of those, and particularly in large organizations as well, like really large tier one contractors, we would call them, they will release a lot of their lessons learned. We will ingest all of that data almost real time. We will take all of that in and put it into the system, way more than any person ever could do.
Yeah.
And not only will it pull that information out when that contractor uploads a risk assessment, it will make recommendations based on that. It will score the risk assessment, and that's something that's really interesting. But it will also share the most relevant documents with the contractor straight away, so they can see exactly which documents they need to be looking at, so which of your company documents and policies they need to be looking at. And again, that's something that's really important because we don't tend to share that information throughout
Yeah.
supply chain. So
Yeah.
this is how we're trying to sort of share knowledge through supply chain. And the number that I talked about, again, we've never put a quantifiable number to a risk assessment based on how likely that document is to be suitable and sufficient for the circumstances. And again, this is where we are now. Where we are in 5 years' time, I can see things like that having absolutely phenomenal benefits and being completely revolutionary the further we go down this rabbit hole of data and information.
Yeah. Gosh, I mean, there's so many upsides and key things there to try and unpack as well. I mean, you're absolutely bang on in terms of the information flow upstream and downstream. It's pretty average at best.
Yep.
And then in terms of the never-ending flow of updates, news bulletins, all that kind of good stuff that comes out of the various parties, again, how on earth is any individual supposed to keep up and maintain that? And you've got a pretty unique overview in the UK. You've got the My Safety Consultant community that we'll talk about in a bit.
Yep.
But in terms of that, you've kind of got your finger on the pulse with what are some of the common pain points for your health and safety consultant and practitioner, right? So I
Yep.
suspect this is probably helping to resolve many of those issues.
Yes, it is. I mean, look, Matt, I love consultants. I used to be a safety consultant. The only reason why that changed was because of COVID lockdown, and I had to pay the mortgage. So in the UK, we had a pretty strict lockdown. But yeah, I built my consultancy. I had clients all over Europe. I had a number of consultants working for me. I had some really big FTSE listed organizations as my clients. So I felt like I built my consultancy to a great standard. And I feel like in the UK that consultants do the backbone of the work. Like consultants do so much work in the UK, even for the large organizations, a lot of work. Training will all be consulted out. All of the fire safety will be contracted out, and an awful lot of health and safety will be contracted out. I feel like consultants are the unsung heroes of the safety world, but they're also the ones that they have the least amount of support, right? They have the least access to this technology because technology is normally cost prohibitive. It's priced at like enterprise model level for people at the very top, the large organizations. And then the people that are doing the backbone of the work in safety don't seem to have access to this technology. And then they also struggle with all of the other things like advertising, sales, marketing their business, SEO, Google ads, like all these things that we need to know. And that's one of the things that my safety consultant is striving to assist with to overcome. And we priced it really low, and we priced it really low for a specific reason, because like we want this to be accessible. Like we want to make a difference. I really want to make a difference. I want consultants to free up as much of their time as possible with the view that the consultants could then spend time face to face with their clients, because we know in safety that's what's going to make the difference. The consultant actually being on the ground with the client, helping them, standing side by side, actually in their workplace, giving them that direct advice and support, not sat behind a computer writing reports, churning them out, sitting there mucking around with Wix websites or WordPress, dragging and dropping boxes, worrying about copywriting in terms of what their content they're putting out or social media posts. Like it's an important part of business that's overlooked, but that's not what's going to improve safety. To me, that's something that we really need to help our consultants in this industry more.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, clearly your experience in the consulting world, you've just defined it really well. So for anyone who's not in the consulting space and perhaps is working in-house, what Peter's just done really accurately is painted probably your average 8 hours in a day for a consultant, where one moment you could be if you're fortunate enough, presenting to a board and helping them to make some significant decisions. And then a couple of hours later, you're slipping on your work boots and you're on a construction site, catching up with the team, doing an audit, maybe running a toolbox talk. And then at the end of the day, catching up with emails and checking in on your website to make sure that it hasn't crashed and that you're also still going to do your social media. It's full on. And you're right in terms of actually what we set out to do. I think it would be fair to say that many consultants are out doing their thing because they want to make a change. They want to make a positive impact in the workplace on a national level. Those of us that have got big ambitions, global level. And so this is one of the other reasons why I was really keen to catch up today, was to kind of shine some light on my safety consultant, because again, in New Zealand, we haven't really had much exposure to it. So perhaps could you help to explain what my safety consultant does and what it is?
Yeah, so in simple terms, it's a business directory. It's an advertising directory for consultants. And one of the great things is that, how do people find a safety consultant? How do businesses find a safety consultant? Now, normally they don't find you on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I'm just going to be honest, but I see all the time safety consultants in the UK advertising on LinkedIn, but they're advertising to their own network, which is predominantly safety consultants, right? So the problem with that is people go, oh, I've got a bit of extra work for you. Can you do a day rate or a day rate there under a white labeled contract, pretending that you are my consultant, not running your own consultancy? Great. Keeps the wolf from the door, puts food on the table, day rate work. I've done loads of it. Doesn't build a business, doesn't build your brand, doesn't build what you're setting out to achieve. So really, businesses find consultants based on Google, and I've had this working with large companies, FTSE listed companies. When you want to put out a safety tender and you're putting out a tender, and it was going to the same 5 companies all the time, the same 5 big companies. And none of the small, really hard-working consultants could be considered for that tender, not because they weren't big enough, just because no one could find them. Because when you type in on Google, you're just going to find a ton of safety consultants on page 100. No one's searching on page 100, but no consultants are ever going to get ahead in that field. So I kind of felt like we needed some system to pull us all together to help us compete on a larger scale, and that's what we're striving to achieve now. Man, SEO is tough. Like, I've got a team working on the SEO. It's tough. I'm just going to be honest. But we've made some significant gains. Ranked number one for things like safety consultant directory. We're ranking really high now for safety experts, and we're just going to keep going and keep going. It's only been 6 months, early days. We've got about 50 consultants on board. The other thing is, when those businesses find those consultants, they want to know where they are. I want to know someone that's local. Well, everyone advertises nationally as safety consultants, and I used to, right? I used to do this all the time, Matt, and I'm sure you see it down in New Zealand. We cover everywhere. We cover nationally.
Yes.
Right, yeah, that's great, but it's not ideal. It's not ideal, me hopping on a flight, flying 400 miles to the other end of the country to go and do 2 fire risk assessments. It would be far better for the planet and more sustainable if we could, and better for my time and sleep if they could just find a consultant down there, and then rather than that consultant traveling 400 miles the opposite direction down here, we could all be found in our local areas. So there's there's an awful lot to do with it. There's an awful lot of education around business as well. So we started off by doing webinars with like marketing and advertising experts, and a good friend of mine is a sales trainer. We're going to start to roll out those webinars, but I kind of realized at first that I had like 2 people on my safety consultant. I was like, 2 people? That's amazing. We're going to roll out all these webinars.
Right. Yeah.
Way too early. Do you know what I mean? And consultants are busy anyway. So these are the ideas that we're going to start to roll out later. But, like I say, we've charged it at like £25 a month. We give a massive free trial period. This is not about trying to rinse money out of consultants in any way. Genuinely, we've priced it as low as we possibly can. As someone said to me, well, if I get one job, it's paid for itself. And of course, one of the other things was about access to technology. It's about using our combined leverage to actually start to say to some of these big organizations, actually, can we use your technology to help improve our safety and our sort of client interaction and how we do our work, our efficiency as well? And one of the first companies to come on board with that was Intuety. So my safety consultant members now have access to Intuety, which is just phenomenal when you think about it in terms of this. Really, I've not seen anything like it in the world in terms of AI and safety. So it's, yeah, that in itself is mind blowing, and that was a great start.
Yeah, yeah, it's so good, so good. Yeah, I mean, again, so much to unpack. It's we've in New Zealand we have it's a national register of recognized qualified professional health and safety
Yep.
people.
Yep.
So it's been around for about 5 or 6 years. It's been a bit of a slow burn. So I think after all that time, we've only still managed to achieve maybe 350, 400 members.
Yep.
And it's great on one hand, but on the other hand, there's so many more practitioners out there that could benefit from something like that. It's fascinating to hear real entrepreneurial spirit, right? So you've been in the trenches, you've been a consultant, you know how it all works and the
Yep.
pain points, and then you've gone away and created this really neat thing that takes away a great deal of that pain. And also enabled and empowered them with some of the very latest tech that's available, which is really cool. So kudos to you. It's quite an achievement. So
Matt,
can
honestly,
you?
means a lot. It means a lot. Thank you
Mm,
so much. Coming from you as
yeah.
well, I really appreciate it because it's been a lot of work. We've had to bootstrap it a
Mm,
lot. There's been a lot of work gone into it, and there still continues to be a lot of work. The website's continually being developed as well behind the scenes.
yep.
Everything is hosted by Amazon AWS. There's an awful lot gone into this. And so, yeah, it means a lot. So thanks very much for saying it. And on the registers, by the way, in the UK, we have these registers, and I'm not going to name the names of them because people think
Mm,
I'm being critical of certain professional bodies that own the memberships, but I'm not. But one of the issues with some of the memberships is that you have to be at a certain level of safety professional in
mm,
order to be allowed to be on the register. And that
yes.
level is almost at the top. Some of the best safety professionals I've ever seen, some of the best consultants are actually not even on those they're not even members of those professional bodies, and they
Yeah.
come at it from a completely different angle. They will come at it from a different background, whether it's a tech background, a data analytics background, an occupational health background, a psychology or behavioral based safety background,
Yeah.
but they're not actually on those professional bodies because they don't see it necessarily adding value to their business.
Mm,
None of those
that's
are
really
on,
interesting.
they're not even permitted to be on the register. So I
Yeah.
see the register as being, as excluding some of the best consultants that we have. Not to mention that the registers, right, the whole thing about the register, right, is it's only good if businesses can find them. So if
Mm,
the
yeah.
business doesn't know your very long, strange title of your register that only safety professionals have ever heard of, well, it's no
Yeah.
good because no one's going to get on Google and search for it.
You're just gonna put the cat among the pigeons. Pete.
I am, or
Yeah, yeah,
you probably got
yeah.
the same thing in New Zealand, by the way. I don't know what you've got in New
No, no,
Zealand, but
no,
we've
no,
got it in the UK.
no, like it's again, disclaimer, certainly not trying to discredit any of the associations here in
No,
New
of course
Zealand, but
not.
it's really similar in terms of what you've just described. It's like it's always been a common pain point, and you hear the conversations in the corridors and in various public forums and stuff that there are many really seasoned, excellent practitioners out there, but they just will never meet that criteria.
Yeah.
And also, yeah, I will say that it is um, bloody hard to find the website and do those searches because I'm aware of it because this is my jam. This is what I
Yeah.
do. But General Joe, nah, there's no chance. And so you've kind of got me thinking a little bit. But anyway, I'll not I won't dig myself any holes. But it's fascinating. So in terms of obviously early days, you had two or three people jump on board. Like how's it going now?
We're
What's the
about
numbers like?
50 members now. So
Yeah.
it was going great guns until August. August, everyone's on holiday. So this month we've only had like a
Cool.
few extra signups, but we're about 50 so far in the UK. I would consider rolling it out overseas as well. That would be
Mm,
really interesting. But then just rolling the tech out as well would be challenging. The website itself, you can roll out overseas, right? It makes no
mm.
odds. But the tech that we supply and the partnerships we have, they don't necessarily translate at the moment. So there's that challenge. But yeah, it's only been going a few months, about 50 members. I think that's really positive so far, and I've
Yeah,
had some great feedback, some great testimonials. And we've had some people get some work off the back of it as well. And as someone said to me the other day, they go, "Well, I've got my job. That's it. It's paid for itself for the next 2 years. It's done."
amazing.
And
Wow.
that
All right,
that
that's
that
great
means a
feedback.
lot. So
Yeah, that's awesome. That's life-changing stuff. So that's so cool. So, okay, so you've got um podcast, you've got the consultant community, you are helping to lead and steer this really amazing AI safety tool that's rolling out. So, in terms of what you are seeing and what you're hearing, what are some of the current challenges that you're seeing for the health and safety practitioner who is one hand juggling the old school way of doing health and safety with this new emerging exciting stuff that's suddenly kind of appeared out of seemingly nowhere for many of us?
okay, let's talk about safety data because you
Mm.
mentioned safety data. Do you mind if I go there? So in
Yeah,
in
please.
in
Let's go.
safety
Yeah.
data, we tend to have leading and lagging indicators. Lagging meaning something's gone wrong, i.e., accidents and incidents. Leading tends to be like audits and inspection documents, some sort of, and we try to get some sort of quantitative measurement from that.
Sorry, Pete.
That's all
Is
right.
it okay? This is Naya. Naya, this is Peter. Peter is talking to me all the way from the UK.
Hello, how are
And right
you?
now, yeah. Yeah. All right. Hey, I'll come and see you shortly.
Yeah,
Okay.
you did nice to me.
I'll read you a story a bit later.
You did nice to me.
Oh, dinner's ready. Thank you. Thanks, Naya.
I did miss you.
Yeah. All right. I'll see you. Thanks, darling.
You see?
Bye.
I guess it's late there, isn't it? Sorry, Matt. Yeah, what are
Yeah.
you on,
No,
like nearly
that's
eight
all right.
o'clock? Dinner time
Yeah.
and
No.
bedtime.
Yeah. Bring on the bedtime. Sorry about that. No,
No, it's
it's
fine.
all good. It's yeah. To be honest, everyone who sort of joins my show and watches the stuff that I do on live feed probably know my family quite
Yeah.
well, so it's become normal, right? So yeah, sorry. Please continue.
No, that's fine. So, look,
Mhm.
in safety, in terms of data, we tend to have leading and lagging indicators. Okay, so lagging indicators, accidents and incidents that we measure. Leading indicators tend to be, those inspections and audits, and we try to put some quantitative measurement around those so we can track and monitor improvements, set KPIs, and work on our metrics. But that tends to be it. And one of the issues then with that is that it's very hard to evidence this notion of return on investment. And this is something that I'm really interested in safety because I've sat in the boardroom a number of times and, you'll have marketing and they will say, well, look, we need to put 4 more people in the social media team looking at digital marketing and we need to spend £50,000 on targeted LinkedIn ads. But when we invest that £50,000, we're going to have this much reach. We're going to have this many click-throughs. We're going to achieve this much. And this is our anticipated ROI based on the metrics of the last 5 campaigns, right? And I work for that company and I'm like, why have we only got 2 safety people in our team, yet in digital marketing they've got 10? It's because they can justify it. It's because they can talk the language that the people on the board want to hear. And I feel like we miss this out. Like when I've sat there and said to people on the board before and said, well, we need to do this, they go, why? Well, Section 2 of so-and-so Act says that no, I don't want to hear the legislation. Explain to me why. Well, we've got a moral duty to do this because of our staff and it improves performance. Yeah. No, explain to me why. Explain to me exactly what I have to do and why. And then I'm just sitting there dumbfounded, like, I don't get this. Am I talking a different language as a safety professional? Why don't they care about people? Am I working for a bad company? I don't understand. We're just not talking the same language anymore. Like, we're talking the language that we were 50 years ago. If we can make these improvements, we can invest this money in this area. But we're just today, people want clear metrics. They want clear numbers. They want clear understanding. And our leading and lagging indicators just aren't cutting it anymore. If we look at lagging indicators for a company and we go, well, how many accidents, right? Let's take some sort of even basic data understanding. And we go, right, well, this organization's had 20 accidents in the past year. What can we tell from that? You're not going to convince a board to invest, 6 figures on 20 accidents that are all different. They're all different. Some might be slips, some might be falls, some might be this, some might be that. How do we analyze 20? The sample size isn't good enough. You know, if I went to buy something as a consumer and they said, well, we asked 20 people and 80% said, well, that's not good enough. I want to see a sample size of 2,000. So our metrics I just don't feel like we've kept up. And I think this is one of the biggest challenges that we've got. And this is one of the things that tech is really going to help us to overcome. And, you know, even when we look at safety spend, and this is something I get really passionate about, I don't think we're even very good at quantifying or measuring safety spend accurately, right? So a company will manage a budget and they will say, look, we want to do some training. Okay, great. So the consultant that comes in, say it's you, Matt, you come in and you do training, they'll measure that and go, well, we spent this much on training. But how much did you spend on staff wages for the training? Well, that comes out of a different budget. We haven't quantified that.
Yeah, of
And a
course.
direct staff wage isn't the cost to employ those staff, right? Because to have those staff, you've got to provide them an office, you've got to provide them IT, you've got to provide HR, provide an EAP program, pensions, insurance, tax. Do you know what I mean? So I call that stealth spend, the unmeasured spend in safety. And I always use an example about Legionella as well. I don't know if you guys manage like Legionella in water systems down in New Zealand.
We do, but it's a very specific space. Probably only a handful of people will even get remotely close to it.
So in the UK, right, we love managing Legionella. Right? There's been quite a few Legionella outbreaks in the UK. It's something that we love. It comes under COSH, Controlled Substances Hazardous to Health regulations. So it's something that we're quite hot on managing Legionella. And one of the control measures for managing Legionella, so Legionella is a bacteria pathogen that's in the water, and you'll measure it through water testing. And if the aerosol gets into people's lungs, it can cause pneumonia. Just explaining for anyone listening that's like, what the hell's he on about? Right, and what we'll do is we'll do some water testing. Then we'll find the bacteria in the water, and then we'll go, right, we're gonna flush the water system out twice daily for the next 2 months. And I've seen companies that have been doing this for years because they've never actually tackled the root cause of the problem. So they just flush water. Well, that water costs money. Not only does it have a massive environmental impact, by the way, but every time they flush, that costs money, and the waste costs money, but it's never measured. And it's what I would call a stealth spend. Now, you can say, well, that's small for a small office, right? Take a hospital. They take a ginormous hospital with tens of thousands of outlets being flushed regularly. And so for me, this is one of the things that we need to tighten up on in the safety professional, because this is what's going to give us clout. When we walk into the boardroom and we go, do you know, last year you spent this much on training? Not we paid a consultant 1,500 quid a day or whatever it is. But actually, when we advertise, when we work out how much it is, we go, this is how much we spent on this. We need to do some more research on it. How do we evidence that that actually works? How do we quantify the efficacy of that control measure that we've put in place? And these are the bits of safety that I get really excited about in terms of the level of detail and what tech can do to help us. Because if we can say, this is what we really spent on safety, this is what we calculated the efficacy of these control measures, of how effective they are, we should divert some of that money off, because it's not actually doing a good job. We spent a significant sum on this, and it's not doing as good a job as we should have done. Maybe we should take some of that money and invest it in this area where it's going to have greater impact. And I think that is where we're going to end up being as safety professionals in the next 5 years. And I think that's going to elevate our status in the workplace way beyond where we currently are with our like moral, emotional, but the law says arguments.
Yes, yeah, that's really quite a unique insight, actually. I haven't
I hear that quite a lot in terms of unique, by the way.
Yeah,
that's not uncommon.
It's really cool. It's like you really have got a really an interesting insight or look into the crystal ball in a way to where you see us being, and it's just fascinating, and it's also hopeful, right? Because again, like when I'm public speaking or when I'm coaching, I often describe the current health and safety practitioner as the individual who is sat outside the boardroom as they are having their meeting, hoping that they are actually going to get an opportunity to have that 5-minute conversation with the board. And
Yep.
so, just waiting for someone to pop out and say, okay, in you come.
Yep.
But then even when they do, the quality of information that they're providing is marginal and it's not inspiring. And as you said, it's often going back to, well, the lag indicators tell us, and we can talk about some of the lead stuff, but really we haven't really got a handle on what that even looks like
Yep.
once the data is on it. So therefore, yeah, we fall back on the legal and moral and ethical argument, which just falls flat, particularly when you're trying to win over the CFO, right?
Yep.
It's so cool. I really appreciate that. Thank you for sharing that.
And by the way, Matt, like, I'm not saying this is the panacea. I'm saying it's a small piece of the puzzle. Because I'll post this stuff and people will go, no, you have to have face-to-face conversations, or HOP says we need to do this, or safety differently, or new view. It's like, I'm not competing, guys. I'm not. I don't disagree with you. I don't. But we know that this world is very big. We know that there's a lot of different businesses. And we know that as we scale up to really large, let me give you the example of the American Airlines thing. Do you hear the old story about American Airlines where they removed an olive from a salad and it saved them $1 million a year?
I can't say I've heard that.
It was really old as well. It was a long time ago. There was a story that they decided that they were going to remove one olive from their salads on the American Airlines flight, their in-flight meal, and it saved them $1 million a year. And it was an example of the scalability of what we're dealing with. And as organizations become a lot bigger, as we become a lot more global in terms of our organizations, I'm seeing, I used to see safety managers, right? It was like, you could be a safety manager. Now I'm seeing like global safety director, global safety executive. The status is getting elevated higher and higher and higher as organizations are getting bigger. So I'm not sitting here saying, look, this is the sole answer. I'm not selling that. Like, of course, things like conversations with people are always going to be the best approach, right? But I'm not talking an organization with 200 people on a factory shop floor anymore, where I'm the safety guy and there's 200 people and I can walk around and I can learn them all by first name and I can know their families, and you can really start to inspire confidence in safety measures. We're talking like giant, massive organizations where little decisions cost companies billions. And how do we approach safety? We go, well, these are our hazards, and this is our shopping list of control measures, right? We just write down all of the control measures we can possibly think. And it is like a wish list. There's no quantifiable evidence as to how effective these control measures are. And these dictate our entire safety spend as an organization. Remove one olive, save $1 million, right? And all I'm saying is we need to start doing some research in this as a profession over the next 5 to 10 years, I would say. And then we can go, do you know what? We spent all this money on toolbox talks and there's really not that much evidence that it works. Maybe we'd be better off just providing them with, I don't know, not broken ladders in the first place. I'm not sure.
Yep. Oh, really fascinating. So good. And it kind of takes me back to earlier on in the conversation when you were kind of helping to describe Intuety and what that does. So that's the kind of really cool AI tech that you're kind of helping to bring to a broader audience. And with that data, so you mentioned the international standard that it's
ISO 27001.
Yeah, that's great, right? So that basically ring fences you the information as a whole, a raft of things sitting behind it, but it just ensures that or enables the tool to be able to share or consider information from other parties, other businesses, but in a safe and secure way. So you end up with a data set that's just massive.
Yeah, and that's one of our biggest challenges, man, in safety, is that we can't collaborate. Like, I've sat around the table with other heads of safety before, and you're sitting there going, can we share our safety data? Like, I talked about the challenge of when you have 20 accidents. Sorry. I talked about the challenge of only having like 20 accidents and not having enough data to analyze. So the first argument then is, well, let's just pool our data together. But the problem is we all have different taxonomy. Everything is labeled differently. Everyone works in a different way. Everything is recorded differently. So there's no standardization there. There's no standard approach to data. So to compile that is really difficult. And this is notwithstanding the commercial sensitivities. Organizations don't want to share this data because it's commercially sensitive. If they release all their accident data, it could affect them for contracts that they go for later on. As much as I hate to say it, I would love it if we would all share it. We can't. So what we need software to circumvent these challenges that we have in collaboration, cooperation, and sharing information. And so to have a system that you can put the information in, it sanitizes that information, and then just gives you the output that you need is like the gold standard, right? That's what we need to strive towards. And when I saw Intuety, and by the way, I should say a lot of my opinions here that I'm talking about in terms of just general AI and tech and safety, this is not Intuety. Intuety is a very specific tool, a company that I work for. So, but yeah, when I saw Intuety, and I was fighting with this idea of how we collaborate, how we share data. That was where my mind had got to. And then we have this argument like garbage in, garbage out that everyone always talks about with data challenges, right? When I saw Intuety, I thought, you know what, the output of an accident is that we review the control measures, we review the risk assessment, right? And then we implement more control measures to prevent reoccurrence. So all I need is those additional controls. And all I need is those controls to be shared, go through a peer review process of professionals within the industry, which this system naturally does, and then those to be suggested on future risk assessments with other organizations. So we put a lot of time in sanitizing this information. We can't have people's names going out there, date of birth, personal information. It's not in compliance with GDPR legislation that we have in the UK. So we're very, very careful about that. And we can't release anything that's commercially sensitive. But the control measure, the output, that can be shared, and it's a suggestion. No one's saying you have to do this. But when you upload a risk assessment, it will go, here's our suggestions, and it will drop it in. And if enough safety professionals go, that's a great suggestion, the system will start to promote those in the system.
That's amazing. It just goes hand in hand with the whole continual improvement piece, right? So, but at scale. So, I mean, the ROI on that, the impact that could potentially have, just be massive, really exciting stuff. So we've mentioned, well, I feel like we've really kind of had a really good glimpse into the future in a way by what we've talked about. For some, it's really exciting, and it's like, can't wait to get into this. For others, it's quite daunting. And I know there's many people that have just head in the sand. It's just a fad.
Yeah,
this
I
is
see
just
it
a
all the
thing.
time. Yeah, I agree.
We'll forget about it. We'll go back to the way it was. Kind of reminds me of, I'm old enough now to remember the rollout of the internet in a way. Like, still it felt like it was clip art on the computer in the schools, and many people sort of said, oh, it's just a fad. This is not going to be a thing. This is another one of those examples, but it's going to have just bigger impact. It's hard to imagine than the internet has had. So anyway, rambling on, but in terms of the safety practitioners, the safety professionals who are beginning to come to terms with this isn't going away, and I do need to invest some time and energy to get familiar and comfortable with what these changes might look like. What is some of the advice, or what are some of the avenues you would steer people toward to get on top of this change?
Yeah, I think they're really great. It's a great question, Matt. And just to go back to these concerns, look, I understand, but I remember paying for stuff by check. And again, I don't know what it's like in New Zealand, but I could go for dinner and I could pull out a paper checkbook, write a check out, and give a piece of paper that I've signed to someone like an IOU. I could go to a supermarket and buy my weekly shopping with a check and hand them this IOU, provided I had the check guarantee card, and then we went to chip and pin, and people were like, well, that'll never work. But in the UK, they were like, people will be rubbing up to you on the train with like a little card machine trying to take money off your card. I was like, that's the weirdest thing in the world, right? And they started selling these wallets that you had to keep your card in to stop people like scamming money off you. And now we're on Apple Pay. And then they were like, well, Apple Pay will only have £100 limit. And now it's unlimited. Like I could literally pay £5,000 if I had £5,000. That'd be lovely. But I could literally
Mm-hmm.
pay £5,000 for something on Apple Pay. I'm pretty sure there's no limit, by the way. Someone will come back to me on LinkedIn and go, "You're chatting rubbish, Pete." But this is the point. Like we've not been involved in that. I've not been involved in that process. It doesn't matter what I write on LinkedIn. It's just happened naturally and evolved. And if you look at safety and how we communicate now, the only reason why you and I are talking now is because of tech. The only reason why we have this global safety profession that is becoming more and more connected is because of platforms like LinkedIn, because of social media. The only reason why we're talking now is because of podcasts and YouTube and all of this information that we have. And then if you look at other technology and safety that people are so fearful of, look at like fire alarm systems, how they've improved. Look at IoT and Internet of Things and sensors, in terms of PPM and, vibration monitoring, all these things that we just didn't have. To me, the reason why there's the fear and the trepidation now is because AI has suddenly been thrust into our face. It's suddenly there with ChatGPT, and it's very, very publicized. Otherwise, all of this tech would just nicely drip feed in the background, right? If you manage a number of businesses now, if you manage a dispersed, say, real estate, you couldn't manage any reasonable sized business without a software system to track and monitor compliance. No one would expect you to manage that on paper. But like you, Matt, when I went to school, there was one computer in the corner. Like they'd just come in, there was one in the corner. Now I couldn't do my job without a computer, without technology. So I don't think we have to be fearful. I think technology has a responsibility to help us to keep up. The tech providers in safety have a responsibility to help us. And the tech providers that I've spoken to really want to help us. Like they really want to help us to do our job better. It's not there for them to try and like bamboozle us. All we've got to be as safety professionals is just a little bit open. Now, we as safety professionals, right, we're cynical. I used to do audits for a living. As an auditor, you become very cynical. It's like, we've got that in place. Okay, prove it. Hang on. And then they run back in with the ink still wet on the paper of the thing they've just printed out. It's like, come on. Like, we're naturally cynical. And I think that steers us in good stead. I don't think that's a bad thing. But I think we have to be slightly curious about technology, slightly open. And I think this is part of this continual improvement process. As I said, as the world of work innovates, like we've got to keep on top of this. Like we've got an obligation as part of our continuing professional development to remain current in order to take this on. And this is not about accepting like weird and wacky things. Like we can approach it with a cynical eye, but we have to recognize where we've come from in literally 5 years. I reckon I wrote a check 5 or 6 years ago, by the way. It wasn't long.
Yeah.
And I want to spend at least another 10, maybe 20 years in this profession. It's going to be unrecognizable compared to where it is. So I've said this before, I'm passionate about tech, but it doesn't matter if I'm a cynic. It's coming anyway. No matter what I post on LinkedIn, even if I sat and went, tech's rubbish on LinkedIn, it doesn't make a difference. By the way, I see the irony that I'm posting that on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Because we have to be realistic, right? That platform wasn't there 15 years ago. We never used it.
Yeah, and it
So,
was very, very different when it first rolled out too. I mean, it was just a place to dump your CV, and that was pretty much it. Like now, far out.
yeah. And
Yeah.
safety is becoming so much broader as well. So
Mm.
I think tech is just a piece of the puzzle that we have to, as safety professionals, we have to keep on top of. Like we have to keep on top of the psychological, behavioral-based safety, human organizational performance side. We have to keep on top of that. It would be wrong of us as safety professionals to go, I dismiss that because I didn't learn that 10 years ago in my traditional approach to safety, right? It would be wrong of us to go, well-being is not for me. It's a bit too fluffy for me. I don't go in for any of it. No, we have to take all of this stuff in order to remain professional at what we do. And I feel like tech is a piece of this puzzle that if we want to remain current, we have to be excited about, and we have to just sort of throw ourselves into it. So as far as resources, don't sign up to a master's degree in machine learning or
Yeah.
generative AI or something. Just look on YouTube. Just listen to podcasts. There are webinars out there all the time from these tech companies. Like I'm doing one in a couple of weeks with Protex AI. There are events all the time. I don't know what it's like again in New Zealand, but IOSH, who are one of our biggest professional bodies here, constantly running events on new technology and AI, and they're really
Cool.
interested in it. They're always free to attend. Just
Mm.
be curious, stay cynical.
Yeah.
Because like with any change, there's an awful lot out there, right? And I think don't accept everything with open arms. Cast a cynical eye over it. You want to make sure that it's right for you, for the organizations, for the profession. But at the same time, don't just close your mind off to it, because it's coming whether we like it or not.
Yeah, brilliant. That's brilliant advice. Can agree more. I enjoy testing and trialing the latest whiz bang stuff. There's lots of free trials and stuff. The vast majority of it is very safe to use. Just don't go to weird and dodgy looking websites. But because I've done that over the last 12 months plus, I've seen how things have evolved. Like frightening, well, not frightening. It's mind blowing how quickly things are advancing. Because often everyone thinks, when you think of AI, everyone immediately goes to ChatGPT, but it's just so much more than ChatGPT.
Man, AI's been
Yeah.
around for years. Think about tools like Grammarly, where it can
Yes.
help predict what you're planning to write and then put that in a better order. And these tools these are really helpful. Like if you're dyslexic or if you struggle to write, if that's something that you struggle to construct sentences in the right way, like Grammarly has been a game changer in terms of that equalization. And these are AI tools. Think about SatNav and how it predicts, what traffic is going to be like tomorrow. AI has been around for a long time. And as I say, you struggle to find, if you look at a lot of investment platforms like your pension bees, those sorts of ones where you can drop your pension in on an app, a lot of those use AI. A lot of those are AI financial modeling systems. And they, in the UK, very, very tightly regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority. They've gone through all the tests, and these have been around for decades. I'm not cynical. I hate to be bold. I'm not cynical. I'm excited that it's our turn, because I feel like safety hasn't been given the importance that it needed for tech to reach our industry. I feel like they went, we can make a ton of money out of this in finance, and that's our priority as a human race. I'm getting too big now, aren't I? It's too early in the morning, mate. My coffee's kicked in now. And to me, it's our people that are the most important. That's what I'm passionate about. Well, okay, so we've used this technology to help us make more money. Great, right? How can we use it now to help make our workers go home safe, to help keep our people safe? And this is where we're at with tech. This isn't a downside. This isn't a negativity. It's an opportunity, like a phenomenal opportunity that should have got to us sooner. This is 2024. It's almost too late for me. We should have been doing this years ago. So when people are cynical about it, I don't want to challenge the profession, right? I don't want to be that guy, but I see this as a massive opportunity, and I don't mind if people message me on LinkedIn and go, this is damaging for our industry. Well, you don't know that here. Like, let's make the most of it. And if we think tech as safety professionals is leading us the wrong way, get involved. Get involved. We're all higher level members of our professional bodies. Get involved. Go to those tech companies and go, I think you're steering it the wrong way. Because I guarantee every tech person I've said will go, every one that I've spoken to has gone, that's amazing. Please come and work with us. Please come and do some consultancy for us. Please come and speak at our events. Help us to steer it in the right way.
Yeah, that is a really good pearl of wisdom out of among a ton of really great advice there.
You're being too kind. I have a ton of junk that I've said.
It's true. And no, like what you just said is a complete reminder. I'm just thinking back. I'm just like, oh man, like I could list the number of companies, and it's quite a few over the years that have, one way or another, with our paths have crossed, and I'm going, that's kind of cool. You thought about this, and then it's then led to another conversation. And I've been contracted to assist several really well-known software health and safety solution providers now in New Zealand. And it also, all of them have got a similar story to what you were describing before as well, is that none of them were out to make a quick buck. It was, they all had those kind of stories, or they had a friend who lost someone who wanted to do something about it. I really strongly recommend that. So if you are as a health and safety practitioner and you have the opportunity to engage with or go and talk to some of these software providers, developing ones, emerging ones, or even well-established ones, great opportunity to go, hey, have you thought of, because that could lead to some really cool stuff. That's excellent advice.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, really cool. Yeah, you got me thinking as well. It's one of the reasons why I've really spent a lot of money, time, and energy in investing in public speaking, in the social side of things, is
Yeah.
because I feel in the health and safety profession, probably on a global scale, I suspect it's fair to say that, is that we have struggled to find our collective voice. And so at the moment here in New Zealand, there's this big media campaign against road cones, traffic management systems. And so all the health and safety profession are just getting smashed over this story, and it just doesn't seem to want to go away. And it's because there's a vacuum. There's no recognized face, body that would counter those conversations. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, maybe that's one of the key things here as well, is with the rise of this really exciting tech that's coming through, we need to be more comfortable in speaking up and saying, that's cool, but have you thought of, yeah, really awesome stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Matt, I love this. I love this conversation as well, because I've seen this so much where people say, they will say, well, that's a really terrible health and safety decision. Health and safety gone mad. It makes the headlines. And then when you drill down into it, the decision hasn't been made by like a chartered safety professional, someone at the top of their game that you would consider to be a professional safety provider. It's someone like a head teacher in a school that's done a 2-day course or something. And I always say, I'm like, I don't understand why this is the case with our profession, right? Because I wouldn't go down to my local pub, get tax advice from some random person at the bar who read something online and go, well, this is accountancy gone mad.
Yes.
They gave me bad tax advice.
Right.
Who'd have thought? And then the whole accountancy industry is like, oh no, we've really got to shake this bad reputation because people are giving terrible advice in bars about tax advice or investment advice. You know, it's like, come on, man, why are we doing this? I don't even know why we pander to this. I had, so I was on Georgina Poole's podcast, Georgina from Australia, and she was, we were having the same conversation, and I said about, there was a very famous case in the UK about conkers, and it's kids playing conkers in schools. And it was, so conkers is a game that we have over here that, by the way, I had no ideas didn't exist in Australia, so this made no sense on the podcast.
Oh, interesting.
But they're like horse
I know
chestnuts.
that,
Horse chestnuts that grow on trees. They're like nuts that get really hard. And kids in school traditionally would put a string through them, and then the idea is that you whack their string. I mean, now kids are just on social media, right? So this is like the nice days back in the 60s and 70s.
You're not about to tell me they've been banned.
Well, there was a famous case where the teacher said, well, kids must wear goggles to play conkers. And that was one of the most famous stories in the UK. And they were like, health and safety's gone mad again. Kids have got to wear goggles to play conkers. But I remember speaking to Georgina about this, and I was like, well, kids put these nuts and then they've got to whack the other nuts. And she's like, kids are whacking their nuts. Oh God, I've explained this really badly first thing in the morning.
Oh, brilliant. Oh, that's hilarious. I'm still, you've got me on kind of a cliff edge here, right? But you can still play conkers at school, right?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, no one, you know, but it's like all these things. No one's banned any of this stuff. There's tons of this stuff that comes out, and they're like, oh, they've banned. There was one where they banned water in a shop to prevent slip hazards, and you know, all of these stupid rules. But no, like, no one at our level has made that decision, and I don't mean that in a rude way. But what I mean is, no one that calls themselves a safety professional, that's their main source of income. It's normally someone that's done a 2 or 3 day course, you know. Very well intended, very well meaning. It gets taken out of context and the story goes out of control.
Yes. Yeah, and then there's obviously the question around what kind of quality of training are these people getting as well. But
of course, that's huge.
Yeah. Cool. I feel like we could talk for hours. I suspect this will probably be the first of many chats like this, hopefully. Covered a lot of ground, but it feels like it's still kind of quite surface level. I think there's plenty of us to unpick in the future. But For now, Peter, I'm going to reluctantly say thank you so much for your time today. It's been phenomenal. And yeah, watch this space. We'll certainly be getting you back on the show.
Yeah, Matt, there's no doubt this is going to keep developing and we're going to keep learning and we're going to keep learning very, very quickly. So every year it's going to be an ever-changing picture and I'm really excited for it. But honestly, Matt, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome.